Hello and welcome to essentially a remake of a previous tutorial that I did where I was demonstrating how to do various stacking techniques. And so if you've already seen the other one, this one's going to be largely the same, but hopefully a little better presented. So the first thing I want to show is how people stack thrusters. You've noticed by now that a lot of the times people will have thrusters in ways that don't seem like the game should allow. And essentially what that is I'll get into the mechanics of it a bit more in the next little segment, but you need to have a module that's no longer attached to the chassis. In this case, I'm going to use the small thrusters because they just simply take up less space. And you can see now I can put these thrusters back in that same space. Now if you were to take one of these thrusters off, you'll see it won't snap back into place, but it will snap into other areas. That's essentially the overlapping mechanic for thrusters that you'll see. But the way that that works is based on another technique that I'm going to call, or that I've been calling module stacking. Now I have here a hole in the ship, and I'd like to put this antimatter cannon in the hole, but you can see it very clearly doesn't fit. So using a very similar technique, I can attach a single block to the side of the ship. I'm going to attach it here. And then I can take a segment of the ship away. Then I can put the put the gun, or I didn't take enough away, but I can just grab extras and put it on here. That's fine. But you take the section of the ship away, you place the module where you want it, and you can see with this one that's hanging here allows me to place the section of the ship back in where it was, and now I have an antimatter cannon where it doesn't really fit. Which brings me to the next big stacking trick that you'll see in tournaments, and this one is called hyperstacking. Now the most important thing to keep in mind with hyperstacking and stacking in general is that the mounting points on any block need to not line up. You can see here, if we keep going, these are the same size as a 1x1 block. And a 1x1 block forms the foundation of the size of various modules in the game. Even the defense cannons are really just the 1v1 or 1x1 block cut in half. So not lining up those mounting points is critical for stacking. If you don't, or if those mount points do line up, then what's going to happen is your ship will not assemble correctly. But you can see here, even though they're very close together, the mounting points didn't line up and they didn't occupy the same space. These tiny blocks do not line up in any realistic manner with the regular blocks. You can see even here they're not lined up yet. And that forms the foundation for hyperstacking. So when you're hyperstacking, you need to pick essentially what you want to hyperstack, and it can be basically anything. You can use whatever you want, and this works with any faction, but like I said, the most important part is that you have the normal, or the thin armor block with one size smaller. And you take these modules like so. Now, this is very similar to the orphan hyperstacking. Building on that just a little bit, you can see that these are both have their own center of mass calculations because they're treated as separate pieces in the game. So using what is basically orphan stacking, we can clone the same segment over and over again. And that is how we hyperstack. Now the importance of the two pieces here that I was using, kind of leapfrogging, they hold the place of where we're going to be, because we need to leave exactly this amount of space available, and we need to cap it with something. So it's easiest just to use the two of these. And this here is called one-dimensional hyperstacking, because your stacked modules only extend in one dimension. But you can, of course, do this in multiple dimensions. It just involves a bit more care. You'll see the same leapfrogging technique, but this time you're copying significantly more, and you place them in the same area. And by doing this, you can get quite a bit going with your module stack. And we no longer need these segments. I like to kind of even it out afterward, just because it looks better to me, I think. And yeah, it's about as good as that's going to get. And then we can combine these methods of stacking. So we can put a module here and use that as our orphan, drag this section of the ship out, place these somewhere in the middle, and then drag the section of the ship back. And there you have it. Quite a few modules. One thing of note, or well, a couple things of note, is that hyperstacked things are very dense. The hyperstacked flat cannons that I have there represent 558 mass of this total ship's 3,700, and you can see it has quite a few armor blocks. On top of that, you are increasingly vulnerable to splash weapons, so you have to be very careful to guard a hyperstack. And additionally, you can do other neat little things, like in this segment of the ship there are 15 thrusters in a 3x3 block. And I'll go ahead and walk you through how I do that. Now, you may have noticed at the front of it, I had one of the little tiny blocks. And that goes back to the whole thing about the modules cannot line up. So I put 5 on the front, and then we want 4 on the back, right? Because in general I like to have more forward thrust than reverse thrust. So now we place our orphans on the side and tear these segments of the ship out. And then we place, we can really do more, but I'm only going to put 3 on each side. Then you can snap this back in, snap this back in, and snap this back in. Ah, shit. I forgot to place the orphan. So, let me just do that real quick. And there you have it. Back to 16 blocks, one of them being normal armor, but 15 thrusters connected to the front of the ship. And because the mounting points don't line up, you can see the mounting point for the forward thrusters is here toward the back, for the reverse thrusters is here at the front, and then the side thrusters would fit anyway. But there you have it. Happy stacking, and I hope you enjoy.